on this computer. So I got a feeling something is not going to, my YouTube is very, very, very slow connecting. Jeez. Valencia, I'm glad clergy on the line so I can keep it clean.
Yeah.
I want to push all this stuff up on the floor right now. Y'all got to pray for me right now. Okay, it's allowing me to go live. Thank you, Jesus. So,
okay.
Let me see. As soon as Pastor comes back.
I'm back.
Okay, so I'm going to go live now on. Uh-oh, it's sending me back to the start again. I don't know, y'all. This acting crazy. YouTube and. Uh-oh, I hear the thunder. Jeez.
It was pouring down real hard earlier.
Yes, it was, and I think that's what affected my, because anytime the wind blows hard, my Comcast just is shot.
Yeah. It's coming now. I can see it outside the windows in my office. It's coming bad. If I showed you that window,
I can see your window from here too.
Yeah,
okay. Well, we are live on Zoom and I'm recording, so I don't know if this Zoom or YouTube is going to work for me. So Valencia, what I'm doing, I am starting with you. You can start speaking as of now. And if this thing kicks in, then I can share it. But if not, I'll have to upload it after the show.
Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. You're listening to New WCEG Network on WCEGTalkRadio.com. Click live stream tab or watch us live on your smart TV, YouTube, WCEG Network. I'm Representative Valencia Stovall, your show host of Issues and Answers for the next hour. We're the worldwide community empowerment group where we speak life into the community. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and on Instagram at WCEG_talk_radio and at WCEG Network. The disclaimer, the topics and opinions of those of the show hosts and guests and not WCEG Network. Thank you for your continued support. And I also encourage you all to visit my website, stovall.com. And you can also follow me on Facebook at Valencia Stovall GA and at Twitter and on Twitter and Instagram and LinkedIn at Valencia Stovall. So we're excited. And also, if you want to call in, the call-in number is 646-876-9923. That's 646-876-9923. Well, thank you all for joining us for this topic of church and politics. And we want to know, what is the church's role in politics? Should they even have a role when it comes to politics? Today was our legislative day 36. So we have 4 more days in the 40-day session. And we took up quite a few bills today. We actually even worked on this past Saturday. That was the first time since being elected that I worked on a Saturday during session. So it was historical. We're excited about finishing out this session. Of course, as you all know, this will be my last legislative session as a state representative representing District 74. And I have decided to run as a U.S. Senate candidate for the position that Senator Isaacson retired from. So let's get into talking a little bit, we'll give a little bit of information, just so you also know. For the COVID confirmed positive cases in the state of Georgia, they were 65,928. So they are continually rising. And if you would like to know where I received that information from, you can visit the website dph.georgia.gov. It's D like David, P like Paul, H like Heather, GORGIA.gov. And that will give you the confirmed cases. It even breaks down by county and everything like that. So, and also if you all want to see us when we're in session on Tuesday all the way to Friday, it will be our last day. You can view us live streaming at house.ga.gov. house.ga.gov. You would click on live broadcasting, and then you would click on the legislative day that we're on, and then that would actually bring you to live streaming. So you get a chance to hear us debate on bills and what bills that are coming over from the Senate, what bills we might have already passed from the House bills that had to go to the Senate, and they might have agreed or disagreed, and it comes back. If they disagree, it comes back to us. And so we did disagree on the Senate version of the budget. Now, for those who don't know, as legislators, we are mandated by the Constitution to pass a balanced budget each legislative session. And so that's our main goal that we have to do before the ending of session. So you'll probably hear some more. There was a proposed 11% cut across the board. So once we insisted on our position, then it goes back to the Senate, and then they insist on their position, then it goes to a conference committee. And the conference committee is made up of members from the House side and the Senate side. Usually no more than about 2 or 3 people each. And they kind of talk among themselves about what they can agree on. Now, sometimes the conference committee has come back where there was no agreements being made. But in this case, it has to be an agreement with that budget. And also, of course, the House Bill 426, which was a hate crime bill that the House passed last year. So many of you all may have thought that we just started talking about hate crime bills on the House side. It was actually passed last year, and it's over in the Senate waiting for their version. Now, I understand that the Lieutenant Governor added in first responders into the bill. And so there was some controversy with that, being that there's already legislation that protects first responders and all of those, that there was no need to add into this particular bill. And the other part that was added in on the Senate version was dealing with if you destroy property because of through hate crime, you can also be held liable or prosecuted for that. So we'll wait and see what happens. If anything happens about that crime bill, it has to happen by midnight, before midnight on Friday, because that's our signing day. And we'll be there probably from 10 a.m. to midnight. That'll be a long day on that particular day. Okay. So we have with us today, so that was it on my brief update about Legislative Day at the State Capitol. And also every morning, I've been doing a brief summary, a brief update of telling you what's going to happen for the upcoming day. So you can always check me out on Facebook with that. So this evening we have with us as a guest, we have Pastor Attorney Bobby Giddens, who's the pastor of Silver Leaf Baptist Church located in Southeast Atlanta, over in my stomping grounds, in the Thomasville area. And he's also a real estate and business lawyer. So when we thought about these topics for church and politics, I said we have to have someone on who could tell us what does the law say, or what are the parameters that the church can and can't do when it comes to politics. And his church also does a lot of community outreach programs. They partner with the local elementary school, and they also provide other needed services in the community. So we appreciate Pastor Giddens on with us. And we also have a special guest, a longtime family friend, Elder Dr. Paul Q. Fortson. We call him Quentin, but since we're on here officially, I'm going to refer to him as Elder Fortson. It's our street names that we talk together. And he's the president and chief operating officer with Paradise Community Development Corporation, Inc., which is a nonprofit located in Clayton County in the city of Forest Park. And one thing about the reason why I asked Elder Fortson to come on and join me as a guest is because his position with running or operating the Paradise CDC. And we've done a lot of projects together. My first career job fair was held at Paradise Community Center at the gymnasium and culture center. So, and then any other projects I used to have early on and even afterwards, we had it. So when it comes to community, I know he has a vast knowledge of that. but he also brings with him, he recently received his doctorate of ministry, doctor of ministry from ITC, and his research was focused on engaging an intergenerational communal conversation about the future of the Black church. And so you can't talk about intergenerational and that conversation without even talking about how politics works into that. And so he's also an ordained elder in the Church of God in Christ. So I am glad that these two men were able to join us today. And I chose them because of their dedicated service to the community. When we think about policies, we know that policies are made by those who are elected, like myself. Okay, so Pastor Giddens experienced a power outage. Oh, well, we're sorry to hear that. So hopefully he'll be able to get the power, you know, I'm finished. Okay, I was about to say, it seems like something going on with my Facebook too. Okay, so hopefully he'll be able to get back, come into the conversation. If not, we'll continue on with Elder Fortson. But policies are made by those who are elected, and those who are elected by the voters. And but usually what happens, those people who are voters make up a small percentage of those who are actually registered. So in other words, more people are registered than those who actually come out and vote. And that's really sad, because the decisions and the people you're putting into positions to make decisions. Oh, there's Pastor Giddens, he's back.
I'm on my phone now, so.
Okay, so those who are in position to make those decisions, they're only decided by a small percentage of the voters. And so just looking at this past election, we had June the 9th, which was our primary election.
Right.
You had about 939,715, and these are official numbers of Republicans that voted. You had 1,079,857 Democrats. Looking at the number, you might say, oh, it was a lot more Democrats that came out to vote. Yes, but the thing on the Republican ballot, they did not have a presidential selection on there, and they did not have a primary for their U.S. Senate, the 2 U.S. Senate seats. So that could contribute to why there were not a lot more Republicans that came out to vote that's recorded. So that's about 2 million votes that's been cast overall. So I would like to ask our guests, so people are asking, where is the church in the time we were talking about COVID-19 and now with everything that's going on with race relations and even with voting? So I know as a little girl, and I'm gonna get into the question, but I know as a little girl, there used to be a Salvation Army used to have a bus that would come by and pick up the children in the neighborhood. And they would take us to the Salvation Army church, and we have Bible study and fellowship. And then I know that there are some other churches that have been doing some outreach ministry, like one the church actually has a bi-monthly job networking. They've been doing it for the past 25 years. But all of those, in order for those programs to exist, some kind of dealing with policies in order for them to exist. So I would like to stop and ask you all, what's your take on the church's role when it comes to politics? So either Pastor Giddens or Fortson, Elder Fortson.
I'll defer to the pastor first, and then.
I've got a lot of lightning over here in my house, man. Am I still on?
Yes.
I'll chime in.
Oh, yes, it's flashing over here.
Yes,
well, my view of it is this. I think that we're at a place now in our history and time where people are pretty much, a lot of them are educated now, more so than, say, in the 50s or 60s. When Dr. King and others were doing a lot of movement kind of things. And people nowadays want to kind of think for themselves. But as far as politics goes, we have to kind of, as far as I see now, walk a kind of thin line as far as pastors actually getting into doing the old days when you have a sheet of people we wanted you to vote for and those kind of things. Because here in the last 10 years or so, because of some of these so-called mega churches, mega pastors, the IRS and many senators are looking closely at actually taking away the nonprofit status of churches. You have people making millions of dollars and they're not taxable and owning a lot of land. I know one church I work with has something like 100 acres. I think New Birth has over 200 acres.
Wow.
And that property is off the tax rolls. See, so there's a movement to have churches be non-profit. We have a lot of people who are non-religious now, and many of them are demanding when they see these images on TV where guys got 3 or 4 jet planes, or got a $65 million plane, and all those kind of things. And they're beginning now to try to push the idea. It's been happening for a while, actually. To push the idea that churches don't need to be non-profit. So we get too much more into, I think, politics. I think that's going to probably hasten that day when churches are no longer tax exempt. As a matter of fact, some of the counties, if you got 100 acres now, they will only exempt the part the church sits on.
Wow.
I've had that happen too.
Wow.
You know.
Okay.
Is it freezing?
I'm also have my Facebook people on, so I'm trying to make sure you can hear as well. So, okay, that's amazing about when you think about the tax roll, of course, of some of the churches and the property that they own, and on the tax roll, because of course, as local government, they want to be able to collect those property taxes off of that for the community. And so when you look at it, I never thought about it from that particular angle. And even with that, that allowed one to revoke the 501c3 status, because of that. So Elder Fortson, what's your take on it?
Well, thank you for this opportunity, and blessings to you on this panel with Pastor Giddens. Because of my position as president and chief operating officer of a nonprofit, I definitely have to face these issues. Speaking of, I believe, however, just to the point the pastor was making, that if the church, because the church's mission is to help the community. When you talk about Jesus having said, as long as you do this for the least of them, then you do it unto me. At the end of the day, I believe that nonprofit status is definitely contingent upon the fact that we should be the ones who are feeding the poor and clothing the naked and visiting those who are in prison. And I know personally that work doesn't make you rich. You're not gonna retire feeding the poor and clothing the naked and that kind of thing. And I believe I understand the legal part, but I just believe that if we get back to doing what we are as the church called to doing, that those kinds of things and the importance of our role doing that in the community, I believe would help protect our nonprofit status. But to further address your question, as far as the church's role in what we call politics and policy making, from Moses to Jesus, we can see that God is interested in what's going on in the government, what's going on in policy, what's going on with people. Moses talked to the Pharaoh, who was the head of the government. Jesus said, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor and open up the blinded eyes. I won't quote the whole scripture for you, but it gives us a very clear picture of what they call a social gospel, that we should not be so spiritually minded that we are not interested in the same things that Jesus was interested in. If you look at throughout Jesus's life, he always was always doing something addressing the leaders about things that were going on. So it is my belief, to directly then address the question, is that the church is not separate from the politics or from the community or from the people. I believe that the church is the moral and spiritual voice of the community. So we're not separate. We are the moral and spiritual voice of the community. In times like these, COVID-19, in times like these, when there is racial and political unrest, it's the church who, I believe, responsibility is to say, this is what the Lord requires of us, is to do justice and love righteousness. At the end of the day, the church, particularly the Black church, has been at the forefront of every major gain that African Americans have gotten since we arrived on these shores. If it wasn't for the church saying, hey, justice and righteousness is what this Christian country requires, what God requires of us. And, you know, there's been a lot of religion and politics intertwined in these last few election cycles. If you're truly a Christian nation, as you like to call it, then equality and justice and the moral voice. I know that, you know, we don't always think of morality when we think of politics and politicians, but I believe that as the spiritual and moral voice of the community, we're not separate, we're in the community as well, that it is our job to say, hey, that is going to marginalize this group of people, or hey, that is going to make life hard for this group of people. Our seniors need us for this. Our kids need us for that. And whether or not we allow ourselves to actually engage in the shaping and writing of policy, that just depends on where where you sit on that fence. But I believe that we are not, as the church, to be swayed by policy and politics. We don't change our message of hope and our message of justice and equality because of some policy. I believe it is us who says, hey, this is what God would like for us to do. And if we do that, I think that our role would be solidified in the community, you know?
Okay. Pastor Giddens, did you want to add anything else?
I would just say that all that it sounds wonderful and good if we were a monolith. We're not. The percentage of people who claim to be Christian is alarmingly low. There are people who are 40 and under who have never been in a church. Mm-hmm. See, I'm not talking about social gospel or social services and those kind of things. I think that our political arm now should be inside the building, where we're actually educating our people as to the importance of voting, as to what bills are on the docket to be voted on, and all those kind of things. But as far as from my experience, I'm looking at it both ways. I'm looking at it from a legal perspective, mm-hmm. And I have seen. I represented Seventh-day Adventist churches. I have AME churches. That's what I do every day, pretty much. So AME, Seventh-day Adventist, Baptist, even white Southern Baptist church I represented. So I'm just telling you that the movement is to take away the church's nonprofit status. I don't think, and it's because not so much like you said, like for my church or maybe where you're located, you don't have 2 or 3 jets laying around in somewhere, and in a 10,000 seat building and all of that. But that's what people see. They don't see the 200 or less members. They see Joel Osteen with 25,000. Wow. So that's what they see. That's what they equate when they hear stories of a preacher wearing $5,000 tennis shoes when he's preaching, buy his wife a Lamborghini for her birthday. That's what they hear, and that's what is driving this movement to take away churches' nonprofit status. As I said earlier, you have it used to be you buy 1 million acres, it was okay, but now a lot of the counties, particularly in the metro area, pretty much only want to exempt the property that the actual building sits on. So that's where we are. I think our move ought to be in education. For example, back in February, I think it was, when they put out the new voting machines. we at our church hosted them to come out to the local assembly there and invited the community to come in and learn how to use the machines. And they actually allowed us to actually go through the whole process, slide your ballot into the little scanner thing and all of that. Had about 30 people show up. And our church is in Thomasville. There's a lot of folk in Thomasville.
Right.
See, so I think the idea now, what we got now is we can't depend on that because people are not going to church. It's like they used to, and many of the younger people don't go at all. Matter of fact, the amount of people who are saying they're non-religious is almost not equal to those who say they're religious.
Wow.
I agree. I agree with what the pastor has said because actually, as Representative Stovall has said, you know, I did this intergenerational study, and we saw this trend of 2 generations of people who were disconnecting and being despondent with the church. And so to connect that, because Pastor made a very salient, very, very poignant point, which is the movement is being driven by this perception that pastors are out here wearing $5,000, $3,000 shoes and got planes and jets.
I didn't know tennis shoes cost that much money.
So they do.
I didn't either, sister.
They have some Nike X tennis shoes that I saw the other day called Nike X. They were like $2,000. I didn't know Nike made $2,000 tennis shoes until really the other day. But here is the reality. And I'll make my point and then we can move. Here's the reality. Mega churches or churches where pastors are able to afford to do those kinds of things are just a little bit less than 2% of the total church population.
Exactly.
They are a small portion. The problem is they're very visible. You got it. They're very visible, and so it's driving this perception. The truth of the matter is that the average church in America has 75 members.
That's true.
That's the average church in America. I think if those of us who are actually driving what is right about this, I think we quiet. I don't know if we're working so much that we're not speaking up. But the Pastor Giddens and I, those kinds of pastors have to speak up and not let that less than 2% be what is perceived to be all of us. Because he's right. We're not a monolith. And I believe that most, the overwhelming majority of most pastors, I believe, are working hard. They're wearing regular price shoes and regular price suits. That they are not out here flying planes. They driving regular cars. And that it's that small percentage that they're looking at that they're able to target all of us. And so we need to speak up. When he talks about education, yes, we need to speak up and say, hey, no, this is not the truth. This is some reality television show.
Right. And I think that, and I think that you all definitely touched on some important points when you talked about speaking up and that perception of the less than 2%. And like you said, it's because they're the ones that are most visible. But those who are serving, are doing the services like both of you all are doing in your respective ministries, is not being heard and it's not being known as much as it should be, especially to policymakers. And different policymakers on the local level. A lot of times the local kind of know what's going on. And then you might have the state elected that may know, but the federal, which are the ones that makes the decision on that 501c3 status, they're the ones that make a decision on what grants are going to be available that are pushed down through the different departments that affect some of the work that you all are already doing in the community. When you think about the Health and Human Services Department, and you think of have all that together that covers. You think about education, like I know with Pastor Giddens with the after school program, the work you've been doing with Thomasville Elementary School. More funds could be allocated to that for outside of school type of organizations or nonprofits. And but if that information is not getting to the policymakers, or at the same time, those policymakers are not knowledgeable about it and willing to push the point to making sure the resources come down, because it kind of results into access and awareness. So are you aware about what's available on the local level, the state level, and even on the federal level? And once you're aware, how do you get access that's needed for the people that you all are serving in your communities? And so when we talk about the voting and the voting machine, and you know, just think of more of the faith-based had been able to do the demonstrations for the voting machine, and even at the most encouraging their members to come out, those 75 on average that we talked about. So I think that policies, you know, do play a major role, because even when I thought about in Forest Park about a couple of years ago, they had placed a moratorium on churches being able to open up in the community. And some people might not even, you know, thought about, where the local city council can stop churches from opening up. Yeah, because they're in charge of the zoning, code enforcement, and all of that, and even the business license or the certificate of occupancy, in order for a church to be able to operate.
You know, two sorts of that, if I may, this is Giddens again, that is driven by the folk in the community that don't want the church in that community. That is driven by the residents. You know, that they don't, we had the problem with, in Decatur, with Newburgh was over on Snapfinger Road. They passed a lot of stuff in the cabs that prevent, a lot of people started fighting the zoning to put a church in their community. Another thing I would say is that 2% that pastor is talking about also drives elected officials. If I call from Silver Leaf, my little 100 members, wherever I got, and they are broader calls, who they're going to see? They're going to see the larger congregations. Of course, we can contact them and all of those things, but they are driven by that 2% also. It has the larger number of members to go and stand in front of also.
Well, being that I am an elected official, I'm gonna chime in on that particular one. I think for me, and it just depends on, I'm trying to do this, making sure I can capture everybody. Okay, so you said white screen. Okay, hold on, y'all. Okay. This ain't working right. Okay, I'm gonna leave it back like I had. Okay, so when we're looking at the congregations, I think for me, it just depends on that elected official. For me, it depends on, you know, looking at how many faith-based I have in the community, how the relationship I've had with those faith-based in the community makes a difference. When it comes down for me, when it's time for my election, on the year that I have my election, I'm always there out in the community working year round. So, so they already know the presence that I've had and the work that I've been doing in the community. When it comes down to, and so with that, then I'm able to kind of see what policies I may need to alter or suggest or change, what kind of grants that might be available, that I'm able to let the faith-based know. One of the things that I did was I held a town hall meeting, a faith-based town hall meeting in my district in Clayton County. And with that, that was an opportunity for the faith-based to tell me what programs that they had in place, and then what ways that I could be able to help them to find out either partnerships that were needed, or even if there were issues that were happening with their congregation, and that goes back to policymakers as well. So it might not be necessarily something directly affecting the church itself, but there might be issues that their members or your members are facing that they might not have a voice to be able to get to the elected officials on. And so kind of talking about a little bit when we talk about the voting. So we know that we have there's an August runoff that's coming up. And then of course the main general election will be November the 3rd. what are some things that, for those who are listening and watching, and even church leaders, that you all would like to recommend to them or suggest to them on how to get the congregation, those who are attending the church, Pastor, and then their friends who may not be attending the church, of things that they can be able to do to help educate the overall community about how important elections are?
Well, for me, it's having kind of one-on-one conversations, because many of our young people don't make the connection between voting and who's in office. That makes a difference. They think, many of them actually think that it doesn't make a difference. And I use the current administration in DC and said it makes a difference who's in that office, because that tenor of how you treat people and how things are done, it rolls downhill. That's why you have people that are now out front calling the N-word and calling 911 for people having barbecues. That comes from the top. So if we understand that there's a connection between voting and who's at the top, it makes a difference overall for the whole society. But they don't seem to get that. So you have to keep kind of talking and stressing and make them understand that who's in office controls what happens in your community and in your life and in your children's life. A lot of people don't understand. We see the surface stuff, but this president is talking about trying to, his goal is to have 300 new district judges. District court judges serve for life, which means, though, he's already got about 30% of the judiciary district courts already with his nominees, his people he put in place. So that tells me then that for the next 30 to 40 years, we're going to be dealing with this. Even after if he's out of there in November, we still got to deal with these judges who think like he thinks.
Right.
Absolutely. Very well said, Pastor. And I'll just add to what the pastor has said is one of the ways to address the question. One of the ways that I believe that we can, first of all, get the word out, or to at least influence and affect more engagement with the system, voting, that kind of thing, is to reestablish trust in the system or in voting. One of the things that I found that many millennials don't believe that their vote counts. And they are the most information inundated generation ever. They got a cell phone. They got information 24 hours a day. What's funny is we think that they don't understand what they're looking at, but they saw, even right here in our own state, a gubernatorial election where the person running in the election was actually overseeing the election and making decisions for the election. And they know when they see things like that, that's unfair. At the end of the day, we have to make them, we have to help them reestablish trust in the system. That comes with relationship. I think those of us who are a part of the leadership and part of community activism should establish relationship. We should do less criticizing and more engaging. You can't correct.
Amen. I agree.
You can't correct these young people if you do not connect with these young people. Second thing I think is that we should do more as far as education, as Pastor has said, in-house, doing education. We need to, as leaders, say what we need to do. Help them understand the history and the people who died and the people who gave their lives so that we would have the right to vote, and why voter suppression issues are such a big deal. Why would that be such a big deal? Because they know voting is valuable. Then the third thing I believe we can do is provide for them in the midst of this, the resources, bridge these gaps. If it's a situation like the one in my neighborhood where I believe transportation is an issue, they're shutting down polling places left and right. At the end of the day, you might register someone to vote, but on election day or on voting day, they can't get from their community, their street, their block, 10 blocks down the street without walking. So I think those of us, maybe we could arrange resources, transportation vans or something that would help the seniors, that would help those without transportation, get those 10 blocks down the road to their polling place. and that they'll be able to do that kind of thing. I think those are just a couple, because this is like a bicycle wheel with spokes, and so you could address one or two here, and you address one or two there, but all of it needs to happen. And I just think that relationship in education, helping them understand history, and then providing them with resources so that they can be involved in the system. But that's just three things I could think of just pretty quickly that we could do to help them or to help the situation.
Right.
I love the idea. Can I say I love the idea of the transportation. I know when we have a National Baptist Convention, for example, comes to Atlanta or any other city, all of the churches that have church vans transport those delegates. So why couldn't this whole city of preachers, we can stop being so self-centered and come together and pull that together during August and in November? I'm sorry, Stovall, I'll cut you off.
That's right.
Oh, no, those are some good points. And you're right. It used to be, I know some years back, that when we had a ride to the polls, so there was no reason for you not to be able to make it to the polls to vote. But I know for June, people were reaching out to me saying, who provided rides? And I was posting something on Facebook, everybody answered to say, well, hey, I'm provided. I know we were dealing with COVID-19, but I think there's some workarounds that could have been done to make sure that people are getting a ride to the polls. And I think too, like you said, that education piece is being able to connect with our young people, millennials, and those in the other age groups, as to helping them understand how policies directly affect you. Just like Pastor said about the judges. So who appoints the judges? Who confirms the judges? So the president appoints the judges on the federal level, and the Senate confirms it. So those people that you elected into the U.S. Senate, like the race that I'm running for, we're the ones that's going to be confirming all of those major appointments. But you're also electing the president. And on the state's level, the governor appoints those the judges when there's an unfilled seat that needs to be filled. So you have to look at who are those people that you're putting in office. And then when you think about locally, on the ballot for the primaries, you had a lot of judges that were up for re-election, who will be up for re-election in the November election as well. So those are people that they are voted for, that's going to determine about their misdemeanor. It's going to determine on a felony and whether there's a fairness in that particular trial that took place. So all these are people that we're electing. And then us as state elected officials, we're now passing legislation on telling what the laws are supposed to be that the judges are going to interpret. And so we're now, during this time, we're deciding on all types of laws down at the state capitol. So it's important who you're voting for. And I think if we're able to make that connection with those who don't vote, because the people that vote, we don't have to tell them about what the purposes are and the importance of it. It's the ones that don't go to the polls to vote. So maybe that might be, something that we could look at is how do we now, using the limitations with COVID-19, how do we, come together and come up with a platform or a basis to be able to get this information out to those who don't vote? Because that's who we want to talk to, those who don't vote. With that, you're listening to New WCEG Network on the WCEGTalkRadio.com, or watch us live on your smart TV, YouTube, WCEG Network. I'm Representative Valencia Stovall, also U.S. independent candidate for U.S. Senate. Your show host for Issues and Answers. And we have about 10 more minutes left, and we're the worldwide community empowerment group where we speak life into the community. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, add us on Instagram at WCEG_talk_radio and at WCEG Network. And the disclaimer is the topics and opinions that you're listening to are those of the show hosts and the guests. They are not of WCEG radio. So these are not WCEG thoughts of what we're talking about. Thank you for your continued support. And so one of the comments I had received on Facebook was we must include and engage our young people as well as educate them about civic engagement. And I tell you, I think even on the school level, we could do more with civic engagement and education as well. And I think that if it's coming from school, it's coming from home, because the parents have an obligation as well.
That's right.
And if it's coming from our faith-based community, then along the line, some kind of way, someone is going to be hearing this information, hopefully repeated 2 or 3 times. So and I didn't know if you all had any questions, you can dial in at 646-876-9923, 646-876-9923. Or if you had a comment you wanted to place it on my Facebook thread, you can. And we would try to get it in with about 9 minutes left. And so I want to make sure that everyone knows how to check your voter status, because that's important. There were some people that were removed from the role of voting, and that's usually done by law. It's supposed to be if you have not voted in 3 consecutive races, presidential races, of 3 consecutive elections. And so just to check, because I know on election day, there were some people that were coming to the polls and they were at the wrong precinct. Matter of fact, they were in the wrong county. And they was like, can I come here and vote? I was like, no. What's the best place that you voted 2 years ago? And so go to mvp.sos.ga.gov. That's M like Mary, V like Valerie of Valencia, P like Paul.sos.ga.gov. And if you're registered to vote, you put your information in, and it will give you a list of all the people that represent you on the federal level all the way down to the local level.
I think my power went out. Got no lights on it.
Okay, I think my
storm is really having a bad effect, right? It's a bad storm out.
Yeah, my service went out on my Facebook. So, all right, we're almost finished. So, so would you all like to have some closing remarks? And like I said, November 3rd is the general election. They are in need of poll workers for the November 3rd election. And so, and it is a paid position. We'll have the option of voting by mail again with absentee.
That's good.
And so as we close out, and y'all give your closing remarks, even some of the concerns that you might have about voting during the COVID-19 pandemic that we're going through as well. But whatever other closing remarks that you all would like to make, then definitely do so at this time.
Well, like I said, I voted in person, and you had to have a mask on, and everybody in the room had on masks, all the poll workers, and they had sanitizer and all that there. So I didn't have a problem at all, even with the COVID-19 voting. So I would say vote in person or vote by mail, but vote.
That's right.
Vote, whatever you do.
I also voted in person, and I did the early voting. I waited in line 6.5 hours.
Woo! Early voting? Wow.
To vote. I was one of those people on that television that the line was going wrapped around the building, but I just felt that it was so important that vote be cast because I understood not just the history and whose shoulders, those shoulders I stand upon, but how important it is to everything you guys have said today. I agree with you in closing remarks, Representative Stovall. I agree with you that it is our responsibility, meaning the generation, not necessarily specifically the church. I include the church in it, but I believe it is our responsibility to teach this generation about the importance of our history, the importance of even the history of this country, and what has been sacrifice so that voting and so that our rights and so that things of that nature can be ours. The funny thing about that is when I received or saw the absentee ballot, I didn't know a lot of those names. You talked about Pastor talked about those judges. I know you're talking about those on the federal level, but even those judges you were talking about, I didn't know those people. And what that ballot, having seen it ahead of time, did was it made me go on the internet and it made me Google who these people were to look, because it was almost overwhelming. It was like, who are all of these people I've never heard of? So at the end of the day, you know, what it made me think about was whose responsibility is it to know these candidates? And I thought, well, the candidates should be advertising. They should be out campaigning. But then I thought, no, it's our responsibility to figure out who is trying to lead us from point A to point B. And so if we have an opportunity as leaders, pastors and I, and even Pastor and I, and even yourself, if we have an opportunity as leaders in the community to help educate the community, I think we should be a part of that. So let's just, I say, all together be part of the solutions that we've talked about today and not part of the problems. So, you know, thank you. And I look forward to seeing what God is doing in the earth, even right now.
Yes. And I think that's the other plus with having the early voting, not early voting, but the absentee ballots, because you did get a chance to look at all the candidates that were on the ballot. And like you said, you got a chance to Google them or call somebody and say, hey, have you ever heard of this person? You know, what was your experience with that person? Who you think I should vote for? And then if you want to take your absentee ballot into the polling precinct, could have done that as well. And you had to turn it in because right now, once they send you that absentee ballot in the system, it says that you have received the ballot and that you are voting. So if you all do receive your absentee and you want to go vote in person, then when you get to the polling place, you can turn it in, or you can sign an affidavit stating that you want your in-person vote to count. Because there's a lot of misinformation about that as well. And so we thank you all. We've been listening to Pastor Attorney Bobby Giddens of Silver Leaf Baptist Church, located in Southeast Atlanta. And we've been listening to Elder Dr. Paul Q. Fortson, the President and Chief Operating Officer of Paradise Community Development Corp. Inc., located in the city of Forest Park. And our subject today has been church and politics. What is the church's role, and or does the church even have a role in politics? So we've had a real robust discussion. I know we've had some power issues because of the storm, but we thank God we were able to braze right through it, or go through it. And I really appreciate these men of God for taking time out to have this conversation, and hopefully we might be able to do a follow-up to this conversation to get it into a little bit more depth of ideas beyond the ones that were discussed. So as a follow-up or closing out in summary, our faith-based, those that have transportation, and you have those church buses, like Pastor Giddens said, when those conventions come in town, everybody's loading up, getting on the vans. And I know it wasn't COVID-19 at that time, so I know we're dealing with a different scenario. But transportation still is needed to making sure that people get out and get a chance to vote, especially in those areas where it's challenged. And even maybe having a list of the voting precincts up at the church. You can be able to get from the county elections office so people can know where they're supposed to vote. Maybe having the website of how they can check their status to make sure they are registered in the system. And if you're not registered, it's not too late to get registered. You can go online and register at mvp.sos.ga.gov. Now, there was a question on any information on the stimulus grant SBA. Right now, I don't have any information. I know that there's still money available. They're still there. and you can check with your local lending institutes. And remember that when I did the other webinar, we talked about those non-traditional type of lending institutions, like your community bank, your credit unions, and then even some like PayPal, Square, and some of the others that are non-traditional also have options as well for you to be able to receive some of the stimulus SBA grant money. Now, I'm not talking about the stimulus checks. I know some people might be still waiting on that. I don't have an answer for that. Early vote days, I don't have the exact dates, but they are in October, the early vote days. So you still have time to register to vote. It's very, very important. I don't see any other questions from our Facebook, and I know we had disconnected a little bit earlier, but we're back on now. And I'm looking at my notes. Last day to apply for your PPP loan is June the 30th. So if you have a small business, then you'll know what PPP is. Those who don't have small business, don't worry about it. Don't apply to you. Thank you, Regina, for letting us know that. And churches also were eligible for the PPP loan as well. I think that wraps it up. Thank you.
Let me say this, Representative Stovall. I would like an opportunity to come. I spoke with our bishop yesterday at church, and the process is flowing very well so that we at our church, at Paradise Church of God in Christ in Forest Park, can get free COVID-19 testing. I know that you're involved in that area and maybe some of your listeners, but I would like an opportunity when we have a chance to come back maybe on this platform and let people from that community know when we'll have free testing for the community. So Bishop Fortson is really gone long strides to make sure we can get free testing at our church. So I'd like that to be able to give that info.
Okay, thank you. And if there are any other churches that are interested in having being a COVID test site, definitely reach out to your local elected officials so that they can be able to help set that up. Or if you already have contact with your Department of Public Health, your local Department of Public Health, they can be able to assist as well. There's no charge for the testing, and it's very important to get tested because we're able to identify where that spreading is or where most people are testing positive. And so I know some people, I don't want to get tested. But it's important to get tested. And then they have the antibodies test as well if you want to take that. And then if you're down near the Capitol, we have the Augusta Medical Center has a bus or vehicle that's out in front of it on the side of the Capitol that's providing free COVID testing and antibodies testing.
So what is necessary if someone wants to come down to that van? What do they need to bring? A driver's license? Do they need to bring what is necessary?
Yeah, so they would bring their driver's license because they have to make sure that's who they are. So yeah, they just need to bring their driver's license, and then they would collect some information, personal information from like their name, date of birth, and ask them a few initial questions like, have you been running a fee, with those preliminary questions that they ask. And then you would go inside the van, what's a big bus, like an RV, and then that's what you'd be tested at. And then they would use those tests, I think, come back within 24 or 48 hours. So they are getting the test results back much faster now. All right. Well, being that there are not any, the runoff early votes, I think is in. I wrote something down here. They should be in July. The early votes are usually about almost 3 weeks before the actual election. So if you're not sure, you go to the Secretary of State's website or check on your county's election website, and you can get those particular dates. Thank you all for joining us on WCEG Talk Radio with our guest, Pastor Attorney Bobby Giddens of Silver Lea Baptist Church, and Elder Dr. Paul Q. Fortson President and COO of Paradise Community Corporation, Inc., and ordained elder in the Church of God in Christ at Paradise. And so thank you all. We appreciate you all listening to our next topic that'll be coming up. And like I said, you can listen in starting tomorrow at State Capitol live streaming. You don't even have to come down, house.ga.gov, and click on live broadcasting, and then click on the date, which will be tomorrow, the 23rd. And you can be able to view live streaming all the time that we're down there, listen to the different bills that we are actually voting on. All right. Thank you so very much. You all have a good evening.
Have a good
Thank
evening.
you, Representative Stovall.
Good one. Thank
Of
you.
course, we'll be talking.
Absolutely, Pastor. Absolutely. See you guys.
Thank you.